Imagine yourself for a moment on a hill in Galilee over 2,000 years ago. The sun is shining, a gentle breeze touches your face, and around you, a crowd settles on the green grass, waiting. There, in front of you, stands a simple man, yet with a gaze full of authority and love. This man is not a king, a great philosopher, or a war general. He is Jesus of Nazareth, and the words he speaks on that day will echo throughout the centuries and forever change the course of human history. You picture yourself sitting there, alongside fishermen, farmers, mothers, and children. Every face carries a story, an expectation, a desire for something greater. And Jesus is about to speak, not as a political leader or a revolutionary seeking to overthrow governments, but as a teacher bringing a message that will revolutionize hearts. And then he begins. His speech will become known as the Sermon on the Mount. And you might be asking yourself, why should I care about something said 2,000 years ago? How can it still be relevant today? Let me tell you, the Sermon on the Mount is not just a collection of beautiful words or an old speech to be read like poetry. It is a revolution of life, of perspectives, of values. Jesus starts by proclaiming something that sounds strange to modern ears. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Now think about that for a moment. What does it mean to be poor in spirit? You might be thinking, poor? In what way? Spiritually weak? Miserable? No, Jesus is speaking about something much deeper. He's talking about recognizing our need, our spiritual emptiness. Being poor in spirit is admitting that we don't have all the answers, that we need something greater than ourselves, that we need God. Do you see how this goes against everything the modern world teaches us? We live in a society that preaches self-sufficiency, the pursuit of success, the idea that we can be happy through our own efforts. But here's Jesus saying, true happiness, true blessing, doesn't come from material achievements or a trouble-free life. It begins when you recognize that you don't have all the answers, when you realize that you need something greater, that you need God. This changes everything, doesn't it? Now imagine. You're there, listening to these words, and suddenly you realize that the Sermon on the Mount isn't just a bunch of moral advice or pretty phrases. It's a call to look inside yourself, recognize your own need, and then look to God. And it doesn't stop there. The Sermon on the Mount is an invitation to a radically new way of living. Imagine a world where forgiveness replaces revenge, where love overcomes hate, where compassion triumphs over selfishness. It sounds like an impossible dream, doesn't it? But that is exactly the world Jesus is proposing. He is calling you to something greater, to live a transformed life, a life filled with purpose and meaning. And that, my friend, starts with an attitude of humility, with being poor in spirit. So, the question is, are you ready for this journey? Are you willing to leave behind what the world defines as success, as happiness, and to experience the kingdom of heaven here and now? Because the sermon you're about to hear could change your life, if you let it. Welcome to the revolution of the heart. Welcome to the Sermon on the Mount. And then Jesus continues. The crowd is silent, and every word from his mouth seems to carry an eternal weight. He looks at those people, at you, and says, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." Now think about that for a moment. In a world that pushes us to be happy all the time, that tells us to ignore our pain and keep moving forward, Jesus does something completely different. He acknowledges the value of tears. He's not talking about pessimism, about sulking in the corners. He's validating human pain, saying that it's okay to cry, that it's part of life to feel sadness, that our losses and hard times have a place on the journey. And more than that, he promises comfort, not just empty words or superficial sympathy, but true comfort that comes from God. Because, let's be honest, how often does the world tell us to be strong, to not show weakness? It's almost as if crying were a sign of failure. But Jesus tells you, crying is not failure. Crying is recognizing that something is wrong, that something hurts us. And it's in that moment of vulnerability that God draws near to bring the comfort no one else can provide. And then Jesus follows with another unexpected statement. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Wait, the meek? But in a world that glorifies the aggressive, those who impose their will, those who stand out through strength and power, how can the meek inherit the earth? Because meekness, as Jesus defines it, is not weakness. It is strength under control. It's having the power to retaliate but choosing not to. It's like a wild horse that has been tamed. All that strength is still there, but now it's directed towards something greater. Being meek means knowing you have the ability to do harm but choosing to do good. It's resisting anger, the desire for revenge, and responding with love. And this is a revolution of values. In a world that says, be the strongest, show who's in charge, Jesus says, no. True strength is not found in brutality but in the ability to stay calm, to choose the path of peace, to build rather than destroy. And that's why the meek will inherit the earth, because they bring life, healing, and transformation to the world around them. And then Jesus continues to paint this radical picture of what it means to live according to the kingdom of God. He says, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled." This is not a casual hunger, a superficial desire for things to be better. It's not saying, oh, it'd be nice if the world were more just. It's a real hunger, like when your body cries out for food or your mouth dries up for water. It's a call to care deeply, not just to wish for justice but to act for it. To actively seek a more just world where people are treated with dignity, where truth is upheld, where compassion reigns. And you realize that this thirst for righteousness is not just a feeling. It's a commitment. It's something that moves you to act, to transform the reality around you, to be someone who brings justice wherever you go. And for this thirst, Jesus promises that we will be filled, because God is just and desires his kingdom of justice to flourish through us. These teachings, they go against the flow of the world. They challenge the status quo. They lead you to question everything you thought you knew about success, strength, power, and justice. And so, the question that remains is, how will you respond to this call? How will these words transform the way you live, the way you treat the people around you, the way you seek a better world? Because Jesus is not just speaking. He's inviting you to be part of this revolution. A revolution that starts in the heart and spreads to every corner of the world. And then, as if Jesus' words weren't revolutionary enough, he makes another statement that challenges everything we know. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Now think about that. In a world that exalts revenge, that celebrates when someone in power falls, where social media turns others' humiliation into entertainment, Jesus proposes the opposite, mercy. Mercy is more than just feeling sorry for someone. It's not a passive emotion. It's an action, a deliberate choice to forgive when you have the right to seek revenge. It's treating someone with kindness even when they've hurt you. It's letting go of bitterness and choosing to offer grace. Can you imagine the impact mercy would have on the world if we all practiced it? How different our families would be, how much deeper our friendships, how transformed our communities. Mercy is not common, it requires courage. It's a form of love in action that breaks the cycles of hate and revenge, and makes room for healing and reconciliation. And then, Jesus raises the bar even higher when he says, "Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God." Now, this isn't about outward purity, about maintaining an impeccable appearance or a religious facade. Jesus is talking about integrity, being genuine and authentic in everything you do, being the same person in public as in private. It's a call to be pure in your motivations, in your intentions. Because today we live in a world of masks, where it's so easy to pretend to be something we're not, where social media only shows the best versions of people. But here, Jesus invites us to something different, to be pure in heart, transparent, without duplicity. And he promises that those who have this purity will see God. Not just one day in the future, but now, in their lives, in their experiences, in the way they perceive the world. And as you hear these words, you begin to realize, what Jesus is proposing is not rules or commands to be followed mechanically. He's painting the picture of a new kind of person. A person who is merciful, pure, with integrity, hungry for righteousness. A person who reflects the very character of God in every aspect of life. Finally, Jesus brings us to the most radical command of all. He says, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Being a peacemaker is not just avoiding conflict or pretending everything is okay. Being a peacemaker is actively working to reconcile, to build bridges where there are walls, to promote peace where there is division. And think for a moment, what would it look like to be a peacemaker in your daily life? Maybe it's being the one who stops a fight before it begins. Maybe it's being the person who reaches out to the colleague everyone avoids. Or maybe it's choosing to be the voice that brings calm, reason, and peace instead of adding fuel to the fire of an argument. These are not easy ideas. They go deep, challenging our pride and our natural instincts to protect and defend ourselves. But this is the revolution Jesus proposes, that we become agents of peace, carrying within us the image of the God who reconciles, who loves, who transforms. And the promise is that we will be called children of God, those who reflect the character of their Father, those who bring to the world a different light, a different love, a different peace. So, how will you choose to live? Will it be like the world, full of division, judgment, and anger? Or will you choose to be part of this revolution of mercy, purity, and peace? But Jesus doesn't stop there. He takes this revolution to another level. He says something that sounds almost impossible to ears accustomed to repaying evil with evil. You have heard that it was said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. Wait a minute. Turn the other cheek? How is that possible? Is Jesus calling us to be weak, to let people walk all over us? Actually, what he's proposing is something much deeper and more challenging. He's calling you to break the cycle of violence, revenge, and hate. In that culture, just like in ours, revenge was seen as normal. If someone wronged you, the expectation was that you would pay them back in kind. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. But Jesus says, stop it. There is a better way. Turning the other cheek doesn't mean being a doormat. It means refusing to repay evil with evil. It means having the strength to break the cycle of violence with an act of love. It means saying, what you did ends here. I will not continue this. I will respond with something different, something transformative. And you might wonder, but why? Why does Jesus ask something so difficult? And then, he delivers the final blow, the statement that leaves everyone breathless. Love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who mistreat and persecute you. Loving your enemies, do you feel the weight of those words? Loving those who hurt you, those who speak badly about you, those who treat you unfairly? It goes against all our natural instincts. We want justice, we want payback. But Jesus calls you to a radical way of living, a way that reflects the heart of God, who makes the sun rise on both the evil and the good, who sends rain on both the righteous and the unrighteous. Loving your enemies is the essence of the divine character. It's showing mercy when no one expects it, choosing to see beyond the hurt and see the human being behind the act. It's praying for those who persecute you, not so they will be punished, but so they will be transformed. It's being light in a world that prefers the darkness of revenge and resentment. And so Jesus presents the most radical challenge of all. Don't just live and let live. Live and love. Love beyond what's expected. Love beyond what's comfortable. Love even your enemies. And you start to understand. The Sermon on the Mount isn't about rules to follow, but about a change of heart. A change that transforms how you see people, how you respond to hate, how you navigate the injustices of life. So what will you do with this idea? Will you continue in the pursuit of eye for eye? Or will you take a step further, turn the other cheek, love your enemy, and be the change the world so desperately needs? Because Jesus is calling you to something the world does not know. A love that transcends barriers, breaks down walls, and transforms even the hardest of hearts. And it's this love that can change not only your life but the lives of everyone around you. And Jesus continues, and this time he touches on something we all do, maybe without even realizing it. Judging. He says, do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. And for a moment, you feel the weight of this truth. How often do you find yourself judging others' flaws? How easy is it to point the finger, to notice the mistakes of your neighbor, your coworker, your own friend? But Jesus isn't talking about having discernment or ignoring right and wrong. He's talking about hypocritical judgment, arrogant judgment. To illustrate this, he uses an image that almost makes you laugh. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? Picture that. A person with a huge log sticking out of their eye, leaning in to try to remove a tiny speck from someone else's eye. It's ridiculous, isn't it? And that's the point. Jesus wants us to see how absurd it is to point out others' faults while ignoring our own. He's saying, start with yourself. Examine your own heart before trying to fix others. Approach people with humility, with empathy, not with an attitude of superiority. Because it's so easy to criticize but so hard to look within and recognize your own flaws, to admit that you, too, have areas that need to be transformed. Imagine the kind of world we would have if we all did this, if instead of judging quickly, we cultivated humility. If instead of condemning, we tried to understand. If instead of talking about the speck in someone else's eye, we focused on dealing with the plank in our own. And to reinforce this idea, Jesus says, "So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets." This is the famous golden rule, and it's revolutionary in its simplicity and depth. It's not about not doing to others what you don't want done to you, which would already be difficult but is more passive. It's about taking the initiative to do good. It's about putting yourself in someone else's shoes, understanding their pain, their struggles, their dreams, and then acting on their behalf. This is active empathy. It's not just avoiding doing harm but going out of your way to do good. It's being intentional about treating people the way you would like to be treated, being the one who brings love, forgiveness, compassion, and justice into others' lives. Jesus is inviting us to a revolution of the heart that starts with how we treat one another, how we judge, how we love. Because judgment, in the end, is not what defines the kingdom of God. What defines the kingdom is love, mercy, and justice. So, what will your response be? How will you live? Will you keep judging everyone around you, measuring others with a strictness that you yourself couldn't handle? Or will you decide to follow Jesus' invitation, to look into your own heart first, extend mercy, and live out the golden rule every day? Because the challenge is set. Don't just be the one who points out errors, but the one who builds bridges. Don't be the one who talks about the speck, but the one who deals with your own plank. Be the one who lives out the revolution of love, forgiveness, and empathy that Jesus invites us to live. And Jesus, as always, gets straight to the point. He talks about something we all face, anxiety. He says, "Therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes?" And you know what that feels like. The knot in your stomach when bills are piling up, when problems seem to stack on top of one another, when the future feels so uncertain. We live in a world that bombards us with worries. Plan for the future, chase the next goal, secure your safety. But Jesus is calling us to a radical change of perspective. He's not saying we should be irresponsible or ignore our duties. He's talking about paralyzing anxiety, the constant worry that can consume our minds and steal our peace. So Jesus points to nature to show you how to live without this burden of anxiety. Look at the birds of the air, he says. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Think about it. Have you ever seen a bird having a panic attack about where it's going to find its next meal? No, they simply trust. They know there will be food, that there will be provision. And Jesus is saying, aren't you worth much more than the birds? Doesn't God care for you even more than them? Then he uses another powerful image. See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. Jesus is telling you, look around you. See how beautiful nature is, how God takes care of every detail. If he takes care of the flowers, which are here today and gone tomorrow, how much more will he take care of you? Then he issues the challenge. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. This is the shift in priorities Jesus proposes. Put God first, seek His kingdom, trust in His righteousness, and let Him take care of the other needs. This isn't a promise that all your problems will disappear. It's not a magic formula for a trouble-free life. It's an invitation to live with a new perspective, trusting that you have a loving Father who knows every detail of your life. And He knows that anxiety will come. He knows that life will bring problems, that there will be days of uncertainty. But Jesus calls you not to let those worries dominate you. When they come, stop. Remember that you are cared for, you are loved, you are seen by a God who holds the entire universe together. And once again, you find yourself faced with a choice. Will you continue carrying the weight of anxiety alone? Or will you choose to trust in God? Let Him take care of you and live one day at a time. Because Jesus isn't calling you to a life of irresponsible carefreeness, but to a life of deep trust. A trust that the God who clothes the flowers of the field, who feeds the birds of the air, cares for you in every detail. And it's in that trust that you find freedom. Freedom from fear, from anxiety, from the worries that keep you from living fully. So, how will you respond to this call? And Jesus, as He walks us through this journey of inner transformation, leads us to one of the most profound moments of His message. He talks about something we all do, often without realizing it, where we place our value, our priorities, our treasures. He says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and rust do not destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal." And you feel the impact of these words, because how many times do we find ourselves chasing the things of this world? Money, status, success, recognition? It's like we're in a relentless race, always looking for the next thing that will satisfy us, the next shiny object that will bring us happiness. The latest phone, the bigger house, the trendiest clothes. And Jesus isn't saying these things are inherently bad, but He is challenging you to look at where you're really placing your heart. For where your treasure is, He continues, there your heart will be also. And this statement hits like a punch to the gut, because it forces us to ask a question we don't always want to face. Where is my treasure? What do I value above all else? Am I putting my trust in things that are temporary, things that can be destroyed, stolen, or worn out over time? Or am I investing my life in something eternal, something that cannot be eaten by moths or taken by thieves? Jesus is calling you to a shift in perspective, to stop storing up treasures on earth that, in the end, won't bring true satisfaction, and to start storing up treasures in heaven, things that have eternal value. This means investing in relationships, in love, in justice, in mercy. It means putting your trust in God, and not in the things you can buy or the possessions you can accumulate. And then, Jesus gives another challenge. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. That's strong, isn't it? Because He's not saying money is evil. He's saying that love for money, the attachment to material things, can easily become a master in our lives, can control us, shape our decisions, and determine the course of our journey. And when that happens, there's no room left for God. It's like trying to walk in two directions at once. You can't do it. You have to choose. And the choice Jesus presents is clear. Either you will live for the temporary things of this world, or you will live for the kingdom of God, which is eternal. So how does this apply to your life? Think for a moment. What are the things you are accumulating? Where are you placing your heart? When you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing on your mind? What's driving you? Jesus isn't calling you to a life of poverty or to neglect material things. He's calling you to a life of right priorities. A life where God is at the center and everything else is in its proper place. A life where you use what you have to serve, to love, to do good. Where you find your value not in what you possess but in who you are before God. And it's this change of heart that leads to true freedom. The freedom not to be a slave to the things of this world but to live for something greater, something eternal. So the question that remains is, who or what will you serve?